Hello, and today we are talking about the RGB20 Pro from Powkiddy. This is a unique device in a sea of devices with this chipset on. So there are a lot of devices that can do this RK3566 chipset performance-wise. You know, we're getting N64, not all of it, but we're getting some N64, we're getting some Dreamcast, we're getting some PSP, that's at the top end. But then you can play, PlayStation 1, you can play all of your Nintendo games, all of that. It plays Nintendo DS, not so great on this tiny screen, but you're gonna get all of that out of this chipset. So there's a lot on the market to compete with this. So let's get into this video and decide, have Powkiddy come up with enough party tricks to make this a worthwhile purchase in 2025? Let's quickly jump into, before I compare it to this beautiful Game Boy over here, let's talk about the competing devices. And the main competitor, I would say, is Powkiddy's own RGB20SX. Now, this is a little bit more expensive. I'll put the prices on the screen. This has its shortcomings. I put different shoulder buttons on here because I didn't like the shoulder buttons. But I do really like the plastic on here, and it has this glorious screen. So for a comparative price, you're getting a similar device with similar ergonomics, although the screen does make it sort of top heavy, which we'll talk about now in the ergonomics. But it does make it a very, very enticing option over and above this one. Okay, so I think if you are shopping around and you've just got into the video, I would say maybe consider this over this if you prefer a nice big screen. Anyway, so the RGB20X is probably the biggest competitor to this. And then we've got like the heroes of the scene, which is the Trim UI Brick, which is a lovely, very popular device. And I was looking for it in my studio. I've had this beautiful custom design done on it, and I can't find it, which is a bit of a worry. And then we've got the Miyu Mini Plus, which is obviously a lot smaller, but a similar concept and a similar price range and a similar performance. What Powkiddy are now trying to do is create a few unique set of features that might entice you to buy this over these other sort of heroes of the retro gaming scene. And one of the things is this curious design. We've got this see-through area, which is actually a window. It's a real window into the electronics at the bottom there. And that is just super unique. Like, no one else is doing that. So that's very unique. We've got ergonomics. So in terms of ergonomics, this thing is pretty exceptional, and we're going to get into it in more detail later. But just to say that it's got the long chin, it's got the bottom heaviness, which rests in your hand nicely, and it's got that sort of familiar cell phone holding experience. So ergonomics are pretty good on this, and also these shoulder buttons and the way that you hold it around the shoulder buttons is really nice. And then this screen, we're going to talk about the screen in a little bit more depth later, but this screen is exceptional. It is, why would you want such a high resolution screen on such a low end device? I don't know, but everything does look pretty spectacular on it. The only niggles I really have with this device is that some of the edges are sharp here. So under here, they haven't sort of chamfered the plastic nicely. Around the edges here, we've got a bit of sharpness. So that bugs me. I really don't like that. I think it just shows sort of the fact that it is a bit cheaper. And it's not actually cheap, you know, it's heading over $100 in some stores. So it's not an ultra cheap device, and I really wish they would just sort stuff like that out. And it's yet another RK3566 device. I mention this in every video. It's mostly just bugging me, but it also bugs the collectors, you know, a collector who likes buying these things as they come out. You know, it would be nice to just have a little bit more power, especially the fact that this has a better screen. And then I like to sometimes throw in these videos like a speculation. A lot of people speculate in the comments like, I wish they had done this. I wish the screen was bigger. I wish the chipset was bigger. They're like, everything's always like bigger, or sometimes people are like, I just wish it was a lot smaller. Whatever, there's always speculation. And with a device like this, with a high resolution screen, I just wanted to sort of put the thing out there that this would have been great as an Android device. Just think about it, like, if you could use it's got sort of a cell phone shape, so do cell phone-y things on it, and you'd be able to put like Netflix on here. Imagine watching Netflix on here. It's got such a sort of nostalgic Apple iPod kind of experience. Like, if this was Android, I probably would take it on my next holiday, like sitting on the airplane or in the wherever, and just with some Bluetooth headphones and watching my shows and playing some games. Like, it is kind of cool. Like, that would have been cool on here. But I mean, that's just speculation, and it would have made it a lot more expensive. So I think as it is, it's pretty damn near perfect for what it is. But we're going to get into more about the details of it. So with this RK3566 chipset, you're getting a bit of PSP on here, and with this screen, it actually is quite nice. You're going to get some Dreamcast. You're going to be able to play NDS, and the shoulder button, I think it's L2, will switch your screens for you, because you're not going to be able to play two screens on here. And I enjoyed a bit of arcade games on here. I played Street Fighter 4 Arcade, and it felt really nice. And that's kind of where the chipset's gonna leave you. And then anything beneath that, you know, obviously Game Boy is gonna look fantastic on here. We'll test the connectivity a little bit later, but this device does have Wi-Fi and Bluetooth. So you'll be able to scrape your artwork. You'll be able to connect Bluetooth controllers, and we'll check all of that just now. And then as you'll see in my D-pad test, the Powkiddy D-pads, especially these large size ones, well actually all the D-pads aren't fantastic in terms of like ghost inputs and that sort of thing. But in my Street Fighter test, which is for me one of the ultimate tests whether the D-pad is gonna work in sort of everyday life, and it works. Like, I can do all my Street Fighter moves without too much issue. I did struggle with the Shoryuken, the uppercuts, the flying uppercuts. I did struggle with that a little bit to get that maneuver right. So with that quick succession, it didn't seem to work too well, but I eventually got it. So not the best D-pad in that department. And then when you see me doing Power Blade, I like to do Power Blade and Contra just to test those sort of up and down movements of, if you press here and move around, is it working? So if you push on the very extreme, it's not as bad, but if you're pressing like a normal person over here and you wiggle it, like in Power Blade, he throws his boomerang up at a diagonal, and in Contra, he gets up and moves. So not the most ideal D-pad, but in a real world environment, I do like these D-pads. They are fun to use, and like I mentioned, you are gonna struggle a little bit with Street Fighter on this D-pad. And I haven't mentioned this in a while, but you know, with these cheaper devices, one of the concerns is the button scraping against the body, and you get that nasty sort of body scrape, and that powder against the side of the buttons. And I just don't think it's going to happen here, because you've got a fair gap between the button and the sort of cover plastic that they've used. And then a shake test. Now I just want to mention that I do boost the audio for that so that you can actually hear it, but it's not that bad. Not that bad at all. Let's talk about the screen, because the screen compared to like the Miu Mini Plus is we've got 1024 pixels by 768 pixels at 3.2 inches. That is not a huge screen, but a very high pixel density. The Miu Mini is 640 by 480. Put it on the screen so you can compare, and it's a bigger screen, so you're getting a much lower pixel density on the Miu Mini Plus. Then, just for funsies, the Game Boy Pocket, the Game Boy DMG is a 2.5 inch screen, and it is a 160 by 144 pixel density screen. So you're getting a lot of pixels, and Game Boy specifically looks really nice on here if you put a nice little shader on there. That is like quite a difference. It's actually quite a good color. I'll put the information of the shader that I used here. I must say, for a Game Boy and on this screen, it really does look good. So as a quick studio light test, this is at its lowest brightness, and it still is fairly bright. Like, often in these studio tests, I'll put the brightness at its dimmest, and you won't even see it now in the darker setting in the studio. And there still is quite a lot of light filtering into the studio. Now, if we put the lights back on, so you can see by the rest of the shot here how much darker it's gotten. I've had to set the camera to adjust to the brightness of the screen. What I like about the screen, that it's somewhere in the middle. Usually with these devices, it's either too bright or it's too dim, and then you can't, compensate. This will deal with bright light situations fairly well. Like if you're sitting by a pool and there's sun shining down on you, you won't see the screen. And then it's a little bit bright in very dimly lit rooms, and then it's not very healthy to sit in your bed and play games anyway. So yeah, it's a nice medium lit screen. And then my beloved Crotch Time, which I know everyone absolutely loves. This is too big for your pockets. And as I always say, if you are rocking cargo pants, rethink your entire life. I'm going to quickly talk about the feeling in hand, not to be mistaken with ergonomics, but obviously very similar things, but this plastic on the front is not nice. It is brittle, and over time it is going to crack. It just, if you've used any plastic like this, sunlight and time is going to cause this plastic to crack. It just is the reality. So that's the one thing about this. But it also doesn't feel very nice. It's just smooth and glossy. But the back is a lovely matte plastic. But again, this is a very brittle plastic. So in the end, and it's got those sharp edges. So in the end, it feels great in the hand, but also doesn't, because it's quite a cheap feeling device with the glossiness here and this brittle plastic here. But yeah, it's got the rounded edges, which definitely is a win for it. And these lovely sort of crests for your fingers. So the body doesn't feel nice in terms of cheapness, but the way that it's designed, I wish it had better materials, that's what I'm trying to say. Because the way that it's designed is really good. It's a really lovely ergonomic design, and we'll talk about the ergonomics in a second. And so my overall quality rating out of 5 is going to be a 2.5, specifically because I don't think they've used the greatest materials on this, and I don't think it's going to stand the test of time. I think it'd be nice in a year's time to go back to this device and say, look at that, it's fallen to pieces. Well, it won't be nice to do that, but I think that's what's going to happen. Okay, I quickly want to illustrate something. I have my Aya Neo 2S here, which costs over like $600, and then we've got a $100 little device over here. Now, let's quickly play the Sonic the Hedgehog intro. Now, I want to mention that is a terrible speaker. Like, it sounds terrible. The audio, the quality of it is not very good, but it's crystal clear coming out the front. Now, and then I'm going to play a video from our friend at Retro Funtech. And now, bear in mind, this is like a $700 device.
Two more devices. And they just dropped specs for one of them and just announced the other one. So we got to talk about this.
So now, the audio is comparable, but it'll be interesting to see how you hear it through this mic, because these are downward firing speakers. And the speakers aren't great on here. They're definitely better speakers than what they've put in the Powkiddy, and they sound almost the same quality because it's firing down from the bottom. So when you're playing like this, everything sounds muffled. And that is just, I harp on this. If you watch my channel regularly, I apologize that you are having to listen to this rant once again. But frontward firing speakers is just the answer. And if you don't put frontward firing speakers, I understand that sometimes there are design limitations, but I don't see the point of making a game console without the speakers firing up the front. I don't use the speakers on a device when it's firing down the bottom because it bothers everyone around me. Now, battery life is interesting, and I'll give a little bit more info on the screen once this review is done, because I kind of test the battery as I'm doing the review. And this is a 5,000 milliamp hour battery. So they've used the real estate and the size of it to give you a really big battery. To give you an idea, the Miyu Mini Plus, obviously a lot smaller, has a 3,000 milliamp hour battery. That's a lot smaller. And so, you got, okay, the higher resolution screen is going to draw a little bit more power, but in the end, you're just getting more battery life on this bigger device. And so that's pretty cool. All right, now I want to harp on, again, it's one of my things that I love to harp on about is I have mentioned when I bought this, I was a huge Game Boy fan as a little boy, and I never had one. I never had one sitting around the house, and so I bought one recently, and you can watch the video about me buying a device like this as a 40-year-old man, and it was just a lovely moment for me to just have this in my hands again. And the thing I said about this is, it's surprising how good the ergonomics are on this, and the reason for that is because you've got a massive piece of tech to hold on to with a little screen in the middle. So your hands are literally just wrapping around this tiny little screen. And so it really does feel good. I do feel like here, I feel like the buttons are in the wrong place. So you end up holding this one like this, and then the screen's up there. If you really want to hold, like, it would be nice if the buttons were here. And the benefit of this is the fact that it's thick and it's got these sort of ribbings here. This doesn't have that. Instead of the ribbings, it has a place for you to put your fingers, so your fingers go there, and so it rests in your finger. So even though this is a sort of matte, smooth matte plastic, it grips in there and sits nice and snugly. It's bottom weighted, so it rests into your hands. And like I said, these buttons are here. If you want to hold this device like this with your hands like pushed up against it, the buttons are kind of in the perfect place. And that's what's great about it. So in summary, you've got a bottom weighted device that is nice and grippable with a place to rest your fingers, and the buttons are in the perfect position. And this is a little secret with this device specifically, and I've mentioned it already, but I'm gonna say this with the gray or green color would be just a lovely device to use, and it would be a lovely Game Boy device. If you're obsessed with Game Boy like me, I'm probably just going to load maybe Rocknex on you and just set my Game Boy perfectly on you and just put a huge catalog of Game Boy games on here, or maybe even one game. Maybe this can be my Tetris device. Anyway, it is a lovely handheld for that one single purpose. So let's quickly just review my ergonomic analysis with the RG406V. You can see this is also a thick boy in comparison to this. It is just a few millimeters thinner than the Game Boy. So it's got these beautifully big grips at the back here. And grabbing it again, I realize it's such a nice device. It's very wide, but sure, this with a small square screen would have been so nice. But anyway, very wide, but just very, very nice to hold. This, I must say, like I always said, this is the GOAT of vertical ergonomics, this DMG. But holding the RG406V, and I'm digressing now, but this really is the GOAT of vertical ergonomics. Like if you want an ergonomic handheld for vertical gameplay, this thing, apart from the very big wide screen, it's just like, this thing feels great. Anyway, so that's the GOAT. So in comparison, jumping back to our cheaper RGB20 Pro, wow, this really does feel nice. It's lighter, it's smaller, and it rests in your hands nicely. So going back to this really does do an excellent job of ergonomics, I have to say. Probably it's in the top 3, I don't know what the third one is, but in the top 3 vertical it's the Game Boy DMG, this, and Anbinix RG406V. Those are the 3 most ergonomic vertical devices on the market, in my humble opinion. Kind of a secret weapon with the RGB20 Pro. There are a lot of devices that are coming out now with HDMI out. The Mia Mini Plus didn't, but there are a lot of devices like the RGB20 SX that I mentioned in the beginning. This has an HDMI, the HDMI Mini output. So what you need is an HDMI Mini, either an adapter or an HDMI cable that has the Mini to normal HDMI output. Now, this screen on my left here is my studio screen. Just to illustrate, let's go to something. Now, audio is going out to the screen. Let's just double check that. Yeah, definitely. Nostalgia maximized with Outrun from the Master System. That's really showing my age. What a good game. All right, so the HDMI definitely works. I'm just going to play it for a while because sometimes you get these syncing issues due to the difference in, I don't actually know the technicalities of it, but something to do with refresh rates between the screen and the device. Whatever's coming out in the HDMI port needs to match the screen. So I'm just going to see if there's no glitching. Yeah, there doesn't seem to be any glitching. And then the next thing is connecting controllers. And so I connected this lovely Bluetooth controller I'm going to link this store in my description below. Acnis are a great, trustworthy Amazon store to get these things from, and they did send this to me, but you know, these are some of my favorite controllers. I actually discovered this one the other day. I don't know where I've been sleeping under a rock, but such a nice handheld controller, Bluetooth controller, very, very nice. The ergonomics are just exceptional. I mean, just think Sony PlayStation, the original Sony PlayStation, but just better. So that's really nice. Anyway, this is a more retro kind of a one, and all I did was I said auto find my device. I put this in pairing mode. It immediately found it. You need to do a few little things. You need to switch the controller in RetroArch for it to work, but yeah, it worked fine. So controllers work. So here's the thing with this device, you know, it is a little bit janky, like typical Powkiddy style, but it is fairly well put together. The only major thing that bothers me is that this plastic on the front is going to perish over time. It is going to crack. It's not great plastic, but it is a wonderful form factor for Game Boy. It is like really nice for plugging into your TV. As I mentioned, the ergonomics are some of the best for a vertical device that I've used. And it has like a wow factor. If you want to buy a gift, this is the kind of thing to buy for kids, and even for like Father's Day, that sort of thing. This is great because it's got that wow factor. For instance, if I ended up with 2 of these in the studio, it definitely would be one of the ones that I give away to friends and family because it just has that specialness to it.